Hi, welcome to the Israel First television program with myself, Martin Blackham, and with my wife, Nathalie Blackham, with a program that looks at Israel, the news, what's behind the news, and we also look at the Hebraic roots. And Nathalie also looks at the Torah and different spiritual things for uplifting you. Now, as we come to you, Israel is still in the midst of a ceasefire with Gaza. Although it seems still like the war's going on, sadly Israeli soldiers are still being killed and there are still operations going on in Gaza. But officially it is a ceasefire. So that's the official position today. But each day the things can change so quickly. Well, one of the issues that has been in the news, which is very important that you understand, is the difficulties with enlistment. As the war has gone on, various IDF reservists have been called up, and we've explained that the reservists come from a pool of mostly young people, but people of all different ages. And they've been having difficulties with that, and there's been a lot of pressure with the Haredi community. Haredi is the ultra-Orthodox Jewish society in Israel, and we've just had the 1 Million Man March, Nathalie, in Jerusalem, where hundreds of thousands of ultra-Orthodox men rallied in Jerusalem, yes, to protest against the draft and against the enlistment, but mainly to pray and fast about the situation. They're very concerned that young people are being forced to join the army, forced to enlist, and if they don't, they're being arrested, and they're concerned about the young Haredi Jews who are in prison.
Yes, because also what that we need to understand ourselves is that Torah, the teaching of the Bible, is so very important. And they know that you need to have prayer and action, but you need to have prayer in the midst of all the things that's happening, which is also what Jesus said. You know, the world is sustained by His word. So they know that the word of God has to be studied. And we have a friend who told us that reading the Bible and studying is an act of worship. And I really keep that, because sometimes we think that worshiping is just praising Him, but when we're in His word is where we can worship Him. And you have the beautiful Psalms 119 of King David, and is the longest psalm, and he's speaking about the word of God. So they want to make sure that the word of God stay in Israel, and sometimes is used politically too much.
Well, now one of the issues was in the media. It was there's been a lot of anti-Haredi media, anti-Haredi conspiracies, anti-Haredi propaganda. They're very much against them, and they have said that it was just a protest. However, what actually happened was that participants were led in communal prayer, with portions of the book of Psalms were recited. Some participants held signs saying, "Bring him back to the yeshiva," calling for the release of Ariel Shammai, a yeshiva student who was arrested from leaving the army because he had concerns about what was happening there. One of the participants in the rally said, "I came to the rally because I have personal reasons. When the state arrests young men for studying Torah, for studying the 5 books of Moses,
yes,
that's a situation that cannot be."
Torah, you're right. Torah means teaching in Hebrew, so is the teaching of the word of God. It's very important.
When I turned 18, it was clear to me that I would sit and study Torah. Torah protects the people of Israel and the world, I would suggest, and is essentially, says, a 23-year-old ultra-Orthodox man from Bnei Brak said the Haredi community is unequivocally the most volunteering community in Israel. It's true, and it's true. You know, from experience, I've seen many ultra-Orthodox people involved in helping in different, for example, in Magen David Adom, or in different lines, charities in Israel. If we don't serve in the army, there's a reason for it. Everyone contributes to the public good. Our highest value is Torah study. This is not selfish. At our age, what we are supposed to do is learn. This is something they've been doing for millennia. It isn't just a recent thing that's been happening. He continued, we want the soldiers to know that we appreciate them for what they do. I believe that thanks to Torah study and prayers, the war has ended now. There are Haredim who don't study, and in principle there's no problem if they enlist, provided that's an adapted program. Unfortunately, the brigade for us to join is not adapted at all. In other words, they don't have the requirements that they need to live their lifestyle. A 30-year-old ultra-Orthodox physical education teacher from Jerusalem said he served 3 years in civilian service. As a medical aid, why am I here? I spent a long time in an ambulance with girls I kept to myself, but other people started dating girls before marriage and started to drift away from religion. We went through many, that's very important for you to know, we went through many generations of hardships and exiles, and Torah study preserved us. And by the way, it wasn't until June 2024, only just over 1 year, that Israel's Supreme Court ruled that Haredi Jews were eligible for military service. So before June 2024, there wasn't conscription for Haredi Jews. And this is a very big issue in Israeli society. And it's important for us to give their perspective, because unfortunately you're not going to get that.
And not only that, it's like we had some friends also Orthodox, and one of my friends was telling me that they are taking some of the money for the children, that they can't, there is now already penalties for the people who are not going to the army, and it's getting more and more difficult. And usually there is quite a lot of women who are working when their husbands are studying Torah. And so the pressure is not just on the man, the pressure is on the whole family. So it's really something concerning, and you can pray about it.
Now, one of the things we've mentioned on the program is the visit of President Trump to Israel. He was very involved, as you know, in the peace treaty. Now, as a result of the peace treaty, one of the conditions was the implementation of United States troops, hundreds of them in Israel. And now, Nathalie, they've been moving into Kiryat Gat and overseeing the Gaza truce. Kiryat Gat has reacted in different ways. Food delivery services are working around the clock to accommodate the new foreign guests. On social media, commentators called, now this is very interesting for those who know what's really going on. On social media, commentators called the United States military deployment in Israel a new world order. So very concerning that is. The Command and Control Center, housed in a converted logistics building about 15 miles from the Gaza border, so it's not so far away, is personneled by hundreds of American soldiers. Some residents are concerned about the Americans, the United States troops. They say that it would endanger the city. It's an interesting question. One resident said, up until now, it was relatively quiet here. Now we have become a strategic target. A third commentator said that whilst the city now boasted a US command center, it still lacked a cinema, a vehicle testing station, a pub, or even a good restaurant open at the weekend. I should explain, by the way, that's a bit unreasonable, the restaurant open at the weekend, because on Shabbat they have to close for Jewish law. So that's the reason they're closed, not because of other issues. Another person wrote that the deployment would give Hamas, Iran and the Houthis a reason to launch missiles at the city, and advised homeowners to sell their apartments in Kiryat Gat, and said it's only going to become another Ofakim, referring to the town in the Gaza Strip, which was very badly affected by the attack of Gaza terrorists on the 7th of October. One commentator went further, saying that the Americans were FEMA soldiers, for those of you who know what FEMA is. FEMA soldiers forming a multinational force that will replace the IDF and police as part of the one world government, which is a very interesting perspective. And, you know, things that I would add a comment to that, and that's that things are happening behind the scenes that we don't know about, which is very interesting. By the way, the sight of FEMA soldiers in Israel is not new. We saw that during COVID. I'm not quite sure what American FEMA soldiers should be doing in Jerusalem during COVID, but that's what we'll see. And, you know, much of the feedback regarding the American troops in Israel is also a general concern about the whole Gaza situation. What on earth is going on there? As you know, and we've reported on the program, journalists are not allowed to go into Gaza by themselves. They have to go with IDF troops, or they have to be invited in. There are some Arab journalists, but there's less and less information coming out, and even that we don't know, because that would be influenced by Hamas. So the reports coming out of Gaza are very difficult to know, and we are trusting that people are telling us what's really going on there. Meir Ben Shabbat, head of the Miskav Institute for National Security, said, and a former national security advisor, told the Israel Hayam daily newspaper that Israel must eliminate the vagueness concerning the United States headquarters and mediation and coordination entities, and explain what the centre will actually contribute towards achieving Israel's goals in Gaza. In other words, it's not really that clear what on earth's going on there. So, and there have been reports as well of American troops in Gaza before that. So it's very interesting what's going on, but difficult to know. There's a lot of smoke and haze, as it were, and unless you're on the ground, and as we've said before, the only really reliable journalism is eyewitness. We can't just trust that everything we read is correct. Now, one of the news stories which I found very interesting, Nathalie, is that Zakim Beach has reopened. You might not be aware of Zakim Beach. Not particularly well known, and not particularly one where anybody would go, but it's the nearest beach to the Gaza fence, and it's the first time that it's been reopened since October the 7th now.
And people were killed during the 7th of October on this beach.
Right, there was loss of life. There was a massacre really on the beach.
Yes, because Hamas was coming from the sea.
Yeah. Now, yes, because it's very close to Gaza. You can see from the beach. You can see the Gaza fence, and that's how close it is. So, still haunted by memories of October the 7th, some locals returned to the site of the seaborne attack. Now reopened after 2 years, and a 20 million shekel renovation. Opening ceremony was postponed at the request of bereaved. So there's still people affected by what happened there who are concerned about the reopening. On October the 7th, 2023, thousands of heavily armed Hamas-led terrorists stormed across the parts of the fence, the border fence, into Israel, making their way into communities to kill, maim, rape and kidnap. In some places, terrorists on motorized hang gliders infiltrated Israel by air. And everybody's question is, where was the IDF? On that same morning, 38 terrorists set out in speedboats from the Gaza Strip. At around 6:45 a.m., 2 speedboats, each carrying 5 gunmen, reached Zikim, the beach, where 32 civilians were sheltering. Hamas gunmen murdered 2 fishermen on the beach and a 26-year-old trucker in the parking lot. Terrorists attacked the bathrooms and bomb shelters, killing 14 more, and a soldier was also murdered who ran to help them. Following the attack, the army declared the military zone a closed area until October the 16th, 2025, until a few days ago, really. Oren Wiseman said his return, he's a resident of the area, his return to this piece of shoreline after 2 years was an act of defiance to bring himself back from post-traumatic stress. As we mentioned before, so many people in Israel are suffering, Nathalie, from post-traumatic stress. I'm back on the beach to make myself stronger. That's what I told my psychologist, he says. On October the 7th, the 50-year-old Sderot native had seen Hamas destroy his hometown and has struggled to return to normal life ever since. Even before the onslaught, he was in treatment for post-traumatic stress, having served as a soldier during Operation Protective Edge. That was another war in Gaza before the present one. His insomnia and panic attacks come back with a vengeance after the massacre, which is another thing we haven't mentioned maybe enough on the program, but people aren't just having loss of sleep, people aren't just having post-traumatic stress, but there are panic attacks is affecting, Nathalie, so many members of the Israeli community. Now, Nathalie, you have things to uplift us, to share with us.
Yes, it's very interesting what you are saying, because I want to speak about finding light in darkness. And I want to bring you some testimonies of 2 young men who were in the tunnels, who were hostages. And there is many testimonies, but these 2 really struck me. And I wanted to share them with you because it's really touching. And it's touching a lot of people because people are listening to interviews of them. And it's affecting, I would say, all the population here in Israel. So first of all, there is Bar Kupperstein. He's a young man who was in the tunnel, and coming out is just starting to speak and say, thank you for your prayers. Thank you for the support. Thank you for my family. I thank you for all the people who prayed. But now I want also to thank you, the maker of this world, and our Father in heaven. Now you need to understand that most of the people who were taken in hostages, they were secular Jews, I would say. They were Jewish, but they didn't really believe in God. They didn't practice. And some are really turning around, seeing how life is precious, knowing that God is with them. And you will hear the other story also, which is astounding. This is the story of Omer Shem Tov, and this is what he's saying. He was in a tiny cell. He couldn't stand up. The cell was too small, and he couldn't even spread his arms because it was touching the 2 sides of the cell. So it's just to tell you how, bad it was and how small it was. He had only half of a pita. Pita bread, is like half of a slice of bread for the day. If they have a cup of tea, this was like, we say Christmas time, it was like feast time. What else? Yes, one thing, it was dark. You couldn't see anything, no shadows, no nothing, dark. Okay. So this, and 40 meters in the ground, down in the ground. So he said, so I tell you his word for word, because it's really touching, and I want really to give you his testimony directly. He said, this was total darkness, you couldn't see anything. But in this darkness, I find the most amount of light. every night I had 5 minutes that I talked to God. Usually people request to God, I want this, I want a big house, I want a big garden, I want a house, I want a car. But nobody, this is what he was saying, okay? But nobody asked God, how are you doing? How is your day today? And he was saying, Father, how are you? How was the day for you today? And do you need something? I mean, it's just amazing. Do you need something? Tell me if you need something. And so when I saw all these young people, you know, they are not religious, but they are spiritual. There was another one who was saying, at the beginning, I was in a place and I saw a crack in the ceiling, and I was starting to speak to this crack. Because, you know, we are human beings, so we need to speak. So he was speaking to this crack. And then he was put somewhere else, and there was just a LED light. And he started to speak to this light and say, hey, you know, how is it? And, you know, because he needed to speak. And then he was in a place again. Also, he was, because they had to move, you know, sometime because they were afraid that the hostages would be fined. And sometime in the midst of the war, they could have, you know, they could hear all the bombing and all these things. And then he was in a very dark place. And he said, this is the first time when I started to speak to God. And you hear so many stories. There was another one, he said, when I came out, I wanted to see the sky. What I want to see is to see the sky. And some people heard him, and so many people sent him pictures of their sky, where they were, and said, this is the sky. You know, they were sharing pictures of sky for him to feel good again. This is the stories that come out now all the time. So let us carry on the story of Omer. This is what he's saying again. And so he was asking God how he was. And then after he said, okay, now I want to say thank you to you for everything. I'm breathing. Thank you for the air that you give me. Thank you for this half slice of bread that you give me to sustain me. Thank you for everything. What else did he say? What I miss, oh yes, so during the interview, after he was saying what I miss the most than when I was a hostage, it was this time that I had with God, because I could feel him. I could feel his presence. He was coming to me, and he was coming to me. I had a big smile on my face. There was nothing around to make me smile, but he made me smile. I tried to do it, and it's only a few times that I've been here free now that I feel his presence again. It was so tangible over there. It was so real that I miss, you know, what I live. I will see him in front of me. I will feel him. I feel God. I had a heart open and a big smile on my face. In the midst of this tunnel, there was a huge light. This is the real Israel. And, you know, the people are listening to all this testimony here. We see more and more people who are stopping for Shabbat. They might not go to the synagogue, but they stop for Shabbat. They have a meal. They put the light for the candles. They are with their children. They go in the garden together. They have family. They have friends. They stop for Shabbat, running around, just being. And I tell you, Shabbat now in this country, or where we are right now, is such a special day. And you can feel God. You can just feel God. In the midst of all this crazy time, there is something that's happening in this country.
It's very powerful, the testimonies that are coming out of the hostages who were in the Gaza tunnels. And a lot of them you can see on the media and look up if you're interested. And I think there are YouTubes as well of interviews, which are very interesting as well, to give you some background as to how it was,
The reality.
of how it was for them. And these are not political interviews or interviews about what's happening, why they were there, or what, who was responsible, but the reality of being there. Well, it's been great to be with you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We very much appreciate your company. Don't forget there's a website, www.israelfirst.org, where you can get the news. I do my best to do a daily news story. You can receive that. There's also a lot of other information, and you can watch. There's also links to be able to watch the program again if you missed it or you came in late and want to see the rest of the program. You can do that on the website. You can also support us. We depend on your support. Your support is the reason that we're able to come into your homes with the program. And on the website, there's a donate page that you can go to. And remember, we're the program that looks at the land, the people, and the language.